for me personally, I think it's a bit of both, but there definitely is a shift happening where more and more people, especially younger, our generations are like growing up to be more critical of what they're buying and be more critical of what they're seeing advertised to them.
Hello and welcome back to the McEwen and Buzz podcast. My name's Jamie. Today we have Gregor and we also have a special guest with us, Rebecca Burns. This episode is going to be a bit of a different one. It's the first guest of 2022. It's going to be a little bit about consumer behaviour from a social science point of view from Rebecca. But let's introduce Rebecca. Welcome to our podcast, first guest of 2022. Can you tell us, the audience, a little bit about yourself? We'd like to get to know you and sort of obviously what you're up to.
Yeah, so obviously, as Jamie's just said, I'm a social science student. So most people don't actually really know what that means. So basically, like actual science involves biology, chemistry, physics. Social science involves other smaller disciplines such as psychology, sociology, and history. And basically, all these things combined is basically how social science studies people and environments, place, and society. With my degree, I'm basically looking at psychology and sociology together. So I'm in my fourth year, moved up to Aberdeen for it. My first year was online, but it's going well so far. Apart from that, just like spending time with friends, family, a bit boring. But
Cool.
I feel like my course just kind of like describes mostly like who I am and stuff. Like outside of it, I do like volunteering for mental health charity and stuff. So yeah, that's basically.
Thank you. So you're studying at Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen?
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is obviously get started into sort of the topic for this episode. Gregor, do you want to sort of outline where we're going with this and let the audience understand what we're going to be talking about today?
Of course. So we want to talk on the subject of consumer behaviour and I guess the impact of psychology and sociology has an impact on consumerism, basically, and ultimately understand why we want to buy stuff. And I guess we want to maybe touch on what does that actually mean with regards to sociology, psychology, with regard to consumer behaviour. Rebecca, do you want to give us maybe a lowdown of what it means to you and what you've learned?
Yeah, so basically what I've learned from studying psychology and sociology when looking at the behaviour of buying things is very much that buying things online, you have like chemicals in your brain that release certain neurotransmitters which make you feel a certain way. So when you complete a task, you have a reward feeling, and that's known as dopamine. So when you buy something, you have a release of dopamine, and that like makes you feel good. So we live in a culture where you're constantly looking at things to buy, looking at things you may be interested in, and that's been influenced by the culture that we live in, which is very much, well, sociology would see it as like sort of disposable, materialistic. Like we've been socialized into buying material things to gain a sense of self-worth from it. And a few studies that I've looked at have actually found that people buy things more when they're feeling low, because it makes them feel good and it makes them have a feeling of a sense of control over their environment, because they feel like they're having a choice in what they want to wear, or even things that they don't need. Like I work in home bargains, and a lot of people come in and everyone is like, oh, I only come in for like one or two things. It's like the thing that everyone says. And it's that constant repetition of like buying things you don't need and then regretting it. But it's because in that moment in time, you've got this association of buying things that makes you feel good, and with it being digital as well, that's reinforced it even more, because you're constantly seeing things with an algorithm as well. It's like that repetition reinforces it. So that's how psychology and like sociology would view it.
Would you say that's I guess a good example is people going into a shop, a very popular shop, and coming out with more than what they went in for. Like, I'm sure everybody does that. I do it. You go into the shop, you come out with more. Is
Yeah,
that, does that play on? It's obviously, it's a business there to make money, and
yeah,
then obviously there's an influence of marketers influencing our behavior. But again, the other flip side of it is, you know, the behavior of people influence what marketers do. So it's like a
yeah,
cycle in a way. Do you think it's more of like a cultural thing that people actually buy more? Because, when I think about it, I buy stuff in the shop. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go and show such and such this. It's quite a cool thing. But that might have just been placed there in a specific way, marketed well in the store for me to buy it.
yeah.
Is there stuff from that, from your side of it, or is it like social factors as well that play on stuff like that?
It's definitely a complicated sort of topic because there's lots of different reasons as well. But that sort of impulse buying, like you said, in marketing, they can kind of exploit on that they know people are going to come in and they're going to be encouraged to buy something if it's placed in a certain way or if visually it is appealing in a certain way. Like I know for my work as well, at Home Bargains, they've got a section at the front which is like all the star buys, all the discounted stuff is like the start of the store. And yeah, like I've noticed shops as well, like Tesco's are constantly switching up like their layout and stuff.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
was definitely
Well, it's like
um
milk's never at the front of the store, or the stuff you need that you would pop in first, never at the front. It's always at the back, so you make your way through everything else. Hence why,
yeah.
but you pick up all the other stuff. Jamie, do you want to maybe, obviously you study marketing, right?
Yeah.
And do you want to maybe touch on why why should businesses maybe learn about this? Why is it important? Why is consumer behavior important?
So I think in our times point of view, guys, obviously from both me and you, probably from what our studies from business and marketing point of view is, we have to understand what consumers' behavior is to get them to buy it. And as we're talking about, Rebecca, obviously about like in the shops, there's things like, even just turning something that's £1 to 99p, that subconscious mind thought that you're getting a good deal because it looks less, is the way that consumer behavior and businesses work. They use socialist science and psychology to manipulate people's mind when they come into basically a shop and play with the subconscious mind of that actually that's something that's worthwhile buying because of either a sign being a specific colour, such as Tesco's use yellow. I know there's a TV programme on a while back that was talked about how even just their signs and the way they place them and what colour they are can be the difference from someone picking it up or not picking it up as they walk through the store. Um, so biggest thing with that, I think, is just consumer behaviour in our world is slightly different in terms of that we are trying to get them to obviously just pick up as much as they can as they're going through the shop. Whereas you're obviously, Rebecca's looking at the
um
view, you're looking at that different point of view of it's
I would
understanding why are people doing this and the effect that can have on people.
yeah, pretty much. And like you said there about you're looking ways to get people to buy more stuff. And sociology and stuff, like there's a specific approach in sociology called Marxism. It's a conflict theory, which basically criticizes that aspect of our culture and the way the economy works and things. Because, like you just said, they are marketing. The whole goal of it is to push product to get people buy product that they don't necessarily need. And that sort of critical theory would argue that that's the whole point of like they talk about class consciousness and how on a whole like the whole sort of population is sort of like very passive when it comes to buying things because like with marketing and things like that they are constantly influenced on things to buy and stuff, and yeah, it can kind of take away the control of the actual individual for things that are actually valuable like their skills and community and things. It makes them focus more on themselves as an individual and what would make them like look good, look more like higher up in the hierarchy, sort of social status, like the next fancy car, things like that. And that sort of widens this sort of gap that we already have in society, which is like people being very, very rich and people being very poor. And with social media and stuff as well, it kind of aggravates that because really poor people are seeing people with like really fancy cars and stuff. And in an aspect, it can kind of be a motivating factor. And I think a lot of people think, oh, if you work hard, you can get that. But the thing is, with inequality, it's like people have divided opportunities, and that it makes them like it makes things unattainable. But it's presented in a way that's like it is attainable.
I think
So
there's like it's a really good point to come out with, and I think from my point of view, you're relating it back to economics and business. There's theories of like neoclassical economics, which is basically saying that people act rationally. So
yeah,
supply and demand markets where people they have a need, so they go and find the product, the market supplies it, and then there's a constant loop. But you know, there's further research that's gone into how irrational people do think, and I think marketing does play on that. So I
yeah,
maybe what I'm getting to is looking into. I think there's a guy called Daniel Kahneman who published some stuff about fast and slow thinking. So you have like a
okay,
systems one thinking where everything's really easy. You play on your memories, you play on like your emotions. It's like, easy to decide what you want to do. It doesn't take too much energy. Then you've got system two thinking, which is a bit more deliberate. It's slower. It requires a lot more brain power to make a choice. So,
hmm,
thinking personally, I'm like, if I'm making a big purchase, I'm thinking system two. So I feel like I'm maybe making a rational decision, whereas I'm, doing pros and cons. But then if I think of like, I'm going to the shop, I'm hungry, I'll nip in the shop, what's closest to me, I'll get it. And maybe that's not the best food that I could have at that time. Might be too full of fat, or I'm picking up like a chocolate bar. I just want it quick and easy, and it's irrational thinking, but it's what I want subconsciously at that moment. But that could
yeah,
be marketed to me in a way that I thought that was a good choice for me
What?
at the moment. And I guess relating it back to, I guess what you're saying is like our Marxism, right? Is like is his argument saying that people are totally rational in their
yeah.
thinking?
Yeah, so his argument is basically like where he's been criticised as well, but he's basically came out and said that everyone is brainwashed by culture and they're constantly like by his sort of ideology came out like at the end of like industrial revolution and things when that sort of thing was like a massive change, whereas now we just take it for granted it's like normal. But I think what you're saying as well, like it definitely depends on the product that you're looking to buy. Like you said, there's sort of things where it's instant, like oh you wanted like a packet of crisps or something, or you wanted like some. Well, in my case, like I can be quite bad for getting into fast fashion. If I'm looking for something to wear and I don't have much time to organize it or go and think, oh, is this the most sustainable thing? I will most likely just order something online. And it's that sort of yeah. There's definitely depends on the product of what you're looking at and also the individual because I think if you are more rational thinking and stuff, you don't really play into that sort of um, influence as much as some more sort of vulnerable people might, especially if people got like poorer like mental health. Maybe like there definitely will be sort of pulled into that sort of stream of feeling inadequate because they don't have a certain material thing.
Yeah,
Do you think, Jamie, I maybe want to touch on it, is the online age, digital age, feeling that more?
I was going to pull back on that. Obviously, Rebecca's point on the aspect of the digital aspect, and I think how what's your thoughts on how the digital world's affecting it, even making it even worse, or even how it's actually causing further issues such as social issues or even psychological issues where people have this. Even bringing into depression, things like that, where because they feel like they're inadequate or not got what they are wanting because marketing, social media has created this influence on consumers' behavior to feel like they have to have certain things. And I would obviously like your point of view of where you think it's going and how bad is it now?
I mean, can I add to that? I guess um, I think what relates to that quite well is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've touched on that, Rebecca, but like that is probably a good way to frame that whole issue. Is like, the lowest of the low is kind of like, what do we need as basic as like food, water, and warmth and rest? It's like, so what's the next level up from that? Do people play on the safety need more through social media? Is that kind of like what we're getting onto?
What do you mean by the safety need?
I mean, I guess just going by the hierarchy of needs, the top one is kind of like you want to achieve like your full potential. But if you're feeling depressed and the lows of the low, fueled by stuff you can't achieve or obtain through social media by looking at other people, then are we kind of like do we automatically fall back to the total basics of, oh, I'm depressed, all I need is to feel safe and secure? And is that fueled by that digital?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question because I think it definitely depends on the individual, but I think social media has kind of like it's reinforced the ideas that are already sort of existing in society and making it a lot more easily accessible for everyone to go on and see. So I think it affects people differently, but I think I'm sort of talking about it more in the sort of way as like desire rather than things that like people um need. Um, but yeah, on an individual basis, I think social media sort of perpetuates ideals in society. So like the best way to look, the best um, things to buy and stuff, which is a bad thing because it's anxiety inducing in itself. Like people feel inadequate and they feel anxious and they feel like they don't fit in a way. But when you look at a certain way, it's like that is some people more than others. But then also it's a positive way because social media has gave people so much more choice. And like how I've talked about how algorithms and things can reinforce ideals and things, but you can turn off at certain ads and things. Like I think more and more now, you've got more choice, and like I touched on fast fashion before and stuff, and how that's obviously like negative. But there is some more like sustainable brands coming out, and you've got things like Depop, where people the whole basis of it is people selling things secondhand, and that's become its own wee industry in its own. And people, it's becoming a trend now for people to go and seek out things on there that aren't part of the system of like um like marketing and things.
Yeah,
But
that makes sense. I guess if we're feeding it back to why people buy stuff, do
mhm.
you feel like, with the digital world that we're in, and obviously what that feels within people, do you think that, obviously as marketers and everything, obviously businesses marketing their all the products online and the ecological products, it's better for the environment. That's a play into people's minds. They don't have to maybe go down that route, but maybe that's what people are buying more of because they're conscious of it. And does that play into a cultural side of society at the moment, or is it more psychological movement? Is there kind of like an argument there, or is there kind of like, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely like a really good like debate that's going on at the minute. It's kind of like, is it like the sort of society and stuff that's influencing um, the products and things? There's actual individuals collectively thinking similarly, like, "Oh, we don't want unethical products and stuff now," and then that's influencing the way marketers are sort of feeding into that. I think for me personally, I think it's a bit of both, but there definitely is a shift happening where more and more people, especially younger, our generations are like growing up to be more critical of what they're buying and be more critical of what they're seeing advertised to them, and they can, like, you've heard of like cancel culture and things. If a YouTuber does something that is immoral or uh, it doesn't fit in, or it's not right or something, people will just cancel them on Twitter and stuff, and they'll just stop watching them. And I think more people that collectively think in that way are sort of influencing that shift in that sort of what we're talking about, that
Is
sort of
it
negative.
is it the rise of digital that's fueling that, or is it the rise of marketers being like, this is, we can play on this idea? I suppose in the cancel culture is different, but with regards to, I'm thinking of vegan food and how, as a family, Jamie, you know, without watching a Netflix documentary, I doubt we would have went, or our parents gone fully
Yeah,
vegan or had as much vegan food. But it's same again. It's more available in supermarkets. There's aisles dedicated to vegan food now, whereas before it might not have been that easily accessible, or you maybe not have been aware of how easy it is to
yeah.
have that diet. But I feel like now it's much easier, and is that it's hard because you feel like there's a marketer sitting behind it, there's a business that's feeling everything and taking advantage of the societal, cultural differences or what's coming about, I guess.
As well, do you not think that there's an aspect to also be playing that the world's having to do this with what, like, this is obviously a bit like off the sort of consumer behavior, but it's maybe an influence to the consumer behavior of the world, what's happening in the world with seeing wildfires in the last few years, flooding, things like this, are actual, and social media being able, having a platform to be able to share it a lot more, so people are able to see it. And I think as our generation, us three being fairly young, are absolutely seeing that more and understanding that we'll see the bigger consequences in years to come if further things happen and it continues to grow as it is. So I think it's probably a good argument there to be like, it's maybe not only social media and marketers that are doing this, it's influence of the world is having to do it, having to change to that side of things and influence people in that way.
It's a
Yeah,
really
and
good point.
I think like you're saying, like the sort of ideas like, oh, you're seeing globally these things, that wouldn't be possible if we didn't have social media. So it's like the ideas that are already coming about socially are being projected on social media. Social media is like the sort of catalyst for it.
Yeah,
It's the sort of like motor for it that's carrying it and stuff, and
which is changing
which
people's
is
consumer
a good
behavior
thing
and
as well. Yeah.
Do you
affecting
think,
people.
obviously, digital world has made it easier for literally anyone to get access to the same information.
Yeah,
That's speeding the process up, but it's also causing, as you're pointing out, more issues.
yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely getting better. Like in terms of like things like diversity and stuff as well. I think that's a marker of definitely things moving in a different direction. And you have a lot more sort of influencers and things coming out and criticizing things that are going on that they don't agree with. Whereas before, I think without having social media, people didn't really have a voice as much. Whereas like if everyone's got a phone, everyone, regardless of where they are in the world, like what class they're in, how much money they have, can go on Twitter because it's free, or go on Facebook, or whatever, and they can like voice their opinion. They can get followers and things and sort of influence um, that side of things, which is definitely a good thing. So I think it's moving in the right direction. And yeah, and it's a good thing to sort of criticize it and sort of evaluate, like, is this actually okay or not, or what can we do about it? Um,
Yeah,
which
well,
is
makes a lot of sense. Jamie, I've got a question for you, which is
Okay.
marketing related. And do you feel like this plays a big part in what you've bought in the past? As in the way that digital has fueled maybe your purchases in the past. Curious to understand how you think about it and how you actually, having had a bit of marketing, you know, knowledge, understanding what it takes to market to people, has that influenced you? And do you have an opinion on how how it's made you make a purchase decision, basically?
Yeah, I 100% say that marketing, from studying it and finishing uni last year to understanding actually how it works and how businesses use it to influence decisions through consumers' behavior and stuff. I think for me, 100% I've had bought things through that, like through the desire or seeing that, or even like, social media algorithms that they pick up, and if you search a certain word, or if you look up something on a website, how it can, the cookies and things in the background can actually figure out what to actually then show you through your social media websites, has had an influence on what I have purchased. I think probably one of the biggest examples is when I was younger, which is something you could reflect on, is buying a RC car. Right? I'm sure you remember that, but
Yep. That was
well,
really good, actually. It was good fun.
I was like 14-year-old buying a £400 RC car just because I had one friend see it, have one, thinking, oh, it's really cool. Looked up tons of videos and had it constantly pop on my social media for a couple months, and finally end up getting one. And when you look back on that, the only reason I probably did get it was because I had a persistent, obviously, desire to obviously want this thing, because it was a want, it wasn't a need, but also because I searched on it, looked it up a couple of times. I had this constant reiteration of it was coming up on social media pages, it was coming up in search history, and that in turn leaded me to buying something that I probably didn't need. And I think that happens a lot. Fast fashion is probably the one of the worst for it, but also I would actually say supermarkets, because they put things in eyesight, or even just the eye level, that the higher chance of purchasing. One of the things I remember studying was talking about positioning of products, of where they put them. As you said to Gregor, obviously milk up the back, but even little things of eye height, or things on higher shelves. And it was just like understanding of putting things in certain places had a higher chance of getting picked off the shelf,
I
or even the
think
end aisles.
totally
Uh,
agree. There's the other side of it as well, which is they're playing on maybe the advertising side of it, as well as they're playing on to, um, I guess what you'd regard as like cognitive biases within humans. Um, I guess one of them that I've had recently was trying to buy a pair of golf shoes, and it's like, loss aversion. So it's like it's basically, or the power of now is like, it was the last pair of trainers that were for sale on this website. Is that true or not? But it's making me go like, I need to buy it now, because if I don't, I'll lose out, right? And is
Yeah,
yeah,
that is that them? You could argue that they could just get another shipment. It is our last one in the warehouse. They're getting a shipment in next week, so it's actually in stock. How does, obviously businesses are playing on that bias within us to generate more sales?
it generates a sense of urgency. So that
Mm.
that sort of process that you had mentally of like you have an association of buying things makes you feel good. So if you it creates that sense of urgency that like this is gonna go, you're not gonna get it. It makes you feel like, oh, I should get it now. Like I get that all the time, just as you were saying that with fast fashion, like things like Boohoo, Pretty Little Thing. I have notifications like at least 2 or 3 a day that are like sale now on, like buy now before it's gone and things like that. Like my student email and stuff is just like filled with like what's the other one?
deals and offers.
Deals and offers and things that are on, or like Black Friday and things, which I'm like,
I think it's
it's much
interesting
more
when you relate that back to how a human brain works. You kind of go, oh, it's a sale, but actually, why does a sale make you want to buy?
yeah, it's
It's
sort
like,
of
It's the endorphins that release in your brain when you get satisfied from something. But it's that sort of I remember Dad saying to us, or me and Gregor's dad saying to us that okay, if you buy this, how are you going to feel 10 minutes from now? How are you going to feel an hour from now? How are you going to feel 10 days from now? How are you going to feel from a year from now? From that, when you purchase something. So if you're purchasing something big, like such as buying a new phone or purchasing like a laptop, okay, maybe some of the things you actually need it, but like for myself, I would quite like a new laptop, but realistically, I've got a laptop that works. So if I purchased a new one, how will I feel? Okay, I'll feel great for an hour, or maybe 10 days once I get used it. But a year on, will it really make a difference to me? Probably not from what I've already got.
it's
So
almost
there's no need.
like, yeah, there's like these tricks that you can use well, tools to
It's fair.
to trick your mind, thinking that you don't actually need it, or you can avoid those biases that you have. There's the other one is, if you're going on a flight or a train ticket, do you need first class or the more expensive seat? And then you take the price difference of the seats available, and you say, would you pay yourself that price difference to sit in a lower class and maybe an uncomfortable seat? So if it's £100 more and it's a 2 hour flight, would you pay yourself £50 an hour to sit in an uncomfortable seat? Actually, yeah, I probably would. And then that forces you to go like, oh, I don't actually need to upgrade. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's different things to do. Um,
Well, Have you got any other questions for Rebecca at all, or our
I
first guest of 2022?
I mean, obviously, it's all about talking about consumer behavior, why we buy stuff, the psychology behind it, the sociology behind it. I don't know if have you ever come across like the product life cycle, Rebecca? Is that something that you're
It rings a bell, but I can't really place it. Life
basically?
cycle.
It's like almost like a bell curve, and it's kind of like you start off with like sales, and then you've got on the y-axis and on the x-axis you've got time. And then
Mhm.
as time goes on, the idea is that if you launch a product,
Mhm.
your sales hit introduction and it starts to increase and it hits growth and it goes up massively. And then
Mhm.
as it hit growth and it starts to taper off, you end up like in a maturity
Mature.
market and then slowly you go into decline. And I was just interested to see, like, obviously, Jamie, you might have more input on this, is you
Yeah,
know, markers are having a huge impact on trying to maintain the growth trajectory or even just
Mhm.
maintain maturity. And, we're all playing on those cognitive biases as well to maintain those growth. Have you, or Jamie, maybe this is one for you as well, do you have any thoughts on maybe a product that you've had or you've noticed like basically businesses being like, this is hitting growth, I can see more people buying it, but they've managed to maintain that growth for a lot longer than what you expected? And
Yeah.
how have they done it? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, well, as you're saying that, I was sort of thinking about back to like fast fashion and stuff, and I think it's a pretty little thing, but it comes up like 22 people have viewed this in the last hour, like 50 people have viewed this in the last thing, and it's like, oh, that's a popular item just now. Is that sort of what you're meaning? I
Yeah,
see that. It kind of makes me feel like, oh, that item is worth buying because it's desired by other people. Like more people want it as well, so it
yeah.
must be trendy. So
and that's
yeah. Mm,
digital right there in front of you. What
mm,
were you,
I
Jamie? Have
think
you thought
I,
thinking?
I think perfect, or probably a good example would be like phones. So, a phone company launches a phone every year, and that's all based off. So, there's going to be this demand for someone to always have a new phone. Everyone in the world has a phone nowadays. It's part of life. So, companies are making a phone and seeing this growth trend where it gets launched, the growth goes nuts, and they hit X amount of sales straight away. But what then you see after that is every phone company in the UK will then market these new phones for months, trying to keep that growth going. But probably about later on in the year, so say it goes out in January, by mid year, they're all trying to keep this maturity level where it's just staying at a constant sales. And then before you know it, people comes to Christmas, people are thinking, actually the next phone's going to come out in January. Let's wait. Let's see about getting the next phone, and probably sales and that on these particular phones stop because the companies are launching. Okay, this next phone's going to be launched January. This next phone's going to be launched
And
April,
how do you
May,
know they're launching a new phone?
because they're going to put it out in social media. They're going to post things. So
Yeah,
it's a perfect example of that sort of life cycle of like or the growth and everything like that, and then decline of everything because there is these highs and lows and stuff. And I think for as a consumer and as if you guys people are listening to this, um, for me and from personal point of views, it's about being aware of how much you're using and what you're consuming. Phones and stuff that only last batteries only last certain long. So if you're changing your phone every year, how good is that for the environment? There's only limited resources in the world that we can keep using to make things that already had shortages. This year's we're seeing major changes in sort of consumers, prices going to increase. And I think the effect on consumers' behaviour and purchasing will be there's going to be a big shift. Personally, what I think from our
mm,
conversation today, it's been like quite in depth of where the world's at. But I think there's going to be a shift in coming years with the way marketing's done. You see it with even just the jobs and trying to get into marketing as a job. There's not as much, I think, because of what's happening in the world, changes, what's going on. Um, but yeah, that's great. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I think it's quite an interesting topic to sort of the growth and the cycle of products. It's quite an interesting one to go through. But have you got anything else? Sorry, I
I've
got
got
quite
nothing
quick.
else. What it was, you touched on a few good things there, Jimmy,
Okay.
and I think you've got a point of people maybe realizing you know, the world is not in a good place, and like this whole environment awareness it's becoming a lot larger, and people are getting to grips with and understanding it. And I feel like it's not just coming from, we're getting that information from a lot of digital means, and it's also government policies coming in as well that are
Yeah.
feeding everything that we're doing. So I think it's very, I don't know. You've obviously got your own opinion, and you can kind of like deal with it yourself and how you process information. The other side of it is, you know, if you all do your bit, you feel like you're going to be part of the bigger uh, society and make a difference. So I guess it's like, and does it actually make a difference if one person does it rather than like a whole country doing it? And there's all these different arguments about, oh, I'm going to go vegan, and it's like, oh, if you go vegan, everybody else needs to go vegan to have an impact on it. If everybody
Yeah.
else is going to eat cows and going to over farm and all those sort of things, it has to be a bigger than you issue, or a bigger than you influence on the issue, which is interesting. But I was interested in how you're thinking marketing is not, there's not many people hiring for you. Talk about jobs and stuff. But I guess again, that's very maybe your view on it, where I think there
Yeah.
might be a lot somewhere else. Yeah, and I think that comes back to what we are talking about with just buying stuff. I have no idea. On certain websites, they tell you there's 22 products left, or this person bought this, like what you said, Rebecca. But you do, and I guess it's
Yeah.
just the abundance of information that's available now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and just how you were saying as well about sort of people going vegan and stuff. Like, it only really works if a lot of people do it. It's the same with, like, on like the back of a toothpaste or stuff. It's like turn the tap off when you're brushing and stuff. You think, how much difference is that actually making? It's like it needs to be more sort of like structural change happening rather than like on an individual level, because you can only do so much, and it only works if that chain reaction starts to have an effect and everyone's sort of doing it. Which I think there is a lot more people now that are eating vegan things like alternative food and stuff, which is good for the environment. But then you also think about the amount of packaging and stuff that some of these vegan products have, so it's like counterproductive. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, so yeah, it's just,
it's like, where can you win?
yeah, I know,
Yeah.
That's
it's
such a
like a
good point.
minefield. Mm.
Yeah. So Rebecca, what we'll do is last sort of question for yourself for the finish this podcast. If there was something you could change, obviously within society, obviously it's quite a hard thing to talk about. There's a lot of things that are going on, but if there's one thing you could do to help change something in society or social or create an impact, what would you do and why?
What, in terms of like consumerism and
Yeah,
stuff?
in terms of like consumer behavior, if you're something you could change.
Um, it's kind of a hard question to answer, because it's sort of like you can't just get rid of the system, because like what's everything is related to it now. So that wouldn't work. I think there's a lot to say about
Do you want to get
like
rid of the system? You
no.
sound like you sound like you do.
I think that's just coming from like sociology and stuff, like how I talked about Marxism before. Like Karl Marx, the guy that founded that, would definitely be like, no, we need to go back to like agricultural community sort of thing. But it just wouldn't work now, because our brains are being socialized differently now. Like, we rely on sort of, yeah, that sort of individualism. Like, it'd be really strange if that was all stripped back. I don't think that's possible. And then you've also got like functionalism in sociology, which is like, well, it sort of gives people a purpose, like it gives people jobs and things, that whole system. But yeah, I think if it was to just be, yeah, have more sort of awareness around like actually the positive and the negative side of it, rather than just pushing things for profit. Actually, more sort of like, is this actually valuable? I think there's a lot to say for like what entrepreneurs and things. Like, I quite actually enjoy watching like The Apprentice and like Dragon's Den and stuff more so than I maybe used to, because I think definitely that sort of side. I think they need to get people that are more aware of sort of sociology side of it into marketing and becoming entrepreneurs and stuff, because you could definitely influence things in a positive way. It doesn't have to be all sort of have a negative influence. So yeah, it's kind of a hard question to answer, but yeah, I think small sort of changes.
So
I
you're not
guess.
opposed to people making money, basically.
No, definitely not.
I
I know
was
it
just trying
sounds
to
a
get
bit
the
like
angle here.
that.
But you think there's means to have business um, as a tool for doing better
Yeah,
in a
and
way.
basically sort of because a lot of companies that sort of go down that route of like profit, 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 they end up actually exploiting like their employers,
Staff.
their staff. Yeah, sorry, I said their employees, I meant their employees. And yeah, just overall being like bad for the environment and stuff. Like I heard a lot about Amazon and stuff. Like their guy was treating these workers unfairly. People didn't have fair working hours and things. And then with fast fashion as well. Like I know I've talked about that quite a bit, but like some of the clothes are being made in like factories in like India, like Asia and things, and they're just being mass produced, and a lot of the time it's by people who are in poverty and stuff, and they're getting paid like £3.50 or something to actually make that top, and then I get it over here, and it's just like there's a balance of like what's actually fair. So I think I'm not opposed to like fair business and fair sort of, yeah, that sort of side of things, but
Equality and
the
equal.
the whole idea of capitalism and stuff, like definitely that sort of chasing that ideal of like being rich and things, people will do any means to get to it now because they think that's the most worthy role to have in society if I'm really wealthy. And you think, okay, but what else? What are you actually going to do with all that money and stuff? Like, are you actually treating people fairly to get to that position? Is the actual product a viable product, or is it just are you just benefiting from it? So I think,
I
yeah,
mean,
it's just
I think you've summarized that beautifully. There's
well,
done a
good.
grand job there.
Yeah. Been a lot of information. It's been great having you on, Rebecca.
Yeah,
Thank you for thank you for coming on.
thank you for
Yeah,
coming
thank
on.
you.
It's been good.
Best of luck with final few months of university and getting dissertation done at Robert Gordon's, and hopefully we'll get you on again once you've finished and you can let us know how you go on.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for having me. It's been a bit of a different experience that I'd be used to, but no, it's been a good chat. It's been really interesting. You could talk about it forever, I think, feel like.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
the
Gregor,
longest one yet. So
yeah. Well,
thank you.
thank you everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Give us a like, follow, subscribe on our YouTube channel, and see us next week with our next guest. Who will it be?
Who will it be? See you next week.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.